Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us to our next session, our next panel, the International FinTech Landscape, where we're going to have some very interesting panelists here. I'm going to introduce them in a second, so thanks for joining us. For this panel, we have Khalid, Dannish, the CEO of Bahrain FinTech Bay. We have Andrew from Disruption Banking, and Thomas Krogh Jensen, the CEO of Copenhagen FinTech. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me to this session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great to have you with us. Full day, very interesting fintech topics, and I think that this one is a super interesting panel discussion talking about not just the international fintech landscape and about the current trends in fintech. We're going to talk about also future trends in fintech and going to explore some opportunities maybe for the entrepreneurs in the area on fintech topics that they should further explore. So before we start, why won't we go around the table and introduce ourselves? Please, Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you, Nir. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I had a look at some of the panels earlier as well. Very engaging content, some really remarkable ideas as well as strategies coming out. So real pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, we're still from home. We are semi-working in London, but not quite at the moment. So I'm calling you from home, but it's a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Eddie. Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Nir. So Thomas Krogh, and CEO of Copenhagen FinTech, calling in from the office actually in Copenhagen. Things are slowly moving and opening up here in Copenhagen. I'm sitting at the Copenhagen FinTech Lab, where we have around 40 companies sitting and doing fintech innovation. So really good to be at least virtually back in Israel, and hope to be physically there soon again.
Thank you, Thomas. Hope so. Khalid.
Hi, thanks, Nir. So hi, my name is Khalid Dannish. I'm CEO of Bahrain FinTech Bay. We're one of the region's largest dedicated fintech hubs. We're strategically backed by 30 industry partners here in Bahrain. We've incubated around 50 fintechs. We'll get into a little bit more about what we do. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm also dialing from home. We're again using a bit of a hybrid model, but hopefully, things will get back to normal soon, and hopefully we'll be in Israel as well. I see the flights are now officially open.
Yeah. In Israel, it's almost behind us, and I hope it will be the same for you anytime soon. And for the rest of our viewers, wherever you are, stay safe, and hope this COVID-19 situation will be behind us very, very soon. So Khalid, thanks for that introduction, and maybe we'll start with you. We have recently signed on a very exciting MOU with FinTech-Aviv, talking about data exchange and basically network and collaborations on different aspects. Maybe if you can share with our audience to start with, and the entrepreneurs in that are with us, what are the opportunities in the GCC region for Israeli fintech startups?
Sure. And obviously, thanks for that. And this is on the back of now our normalization. So it's definitely an opportunity that we should grab with both hands. So maybe a little bit about our ecosystem in Bahrain FinTech Bay, and obviously our new partnership. So obviously every ecosystem has its strengths. Ours is that obviously the financial services sector is very important for us. It's the largest contributor to our GDP after oil. So obviously it's big on our diversification strategies. We're quite small in terms of geography. However, we are of course located amongst larger markets and our neighbors in the GCC. I think the difference in our ecosystem and the strength lies not just in financial services and our push towards fintech, but also that we've aimed to create a business-friendly environment, and it's aligned to a national strategy. So everyone's taking fintech seriously, from government all the way to industry and investors. Bahrain FinTech launched in 2018 as a dedicated fintech hub. As I mentioned, strategically backed by industry partners. And we offer basically support to startups and corporates through acceleration, incubation, business development services. We also look to the adoption of fintech across the region through a holistic proposition that we have here in Bahrain. Obviously, our partnership with FinTech-Aviv, we are super happy to be involved in that, and it's I think a good first step that we've taken. I think this partnership represents a bridge for fintechs, for business opportunities to flow across, and I would encourage all existing startups and existing businesses to look at both of our entities as that conduit to facilitating business across the regions. For Israeli startups, obviously we understand that the US, Europe, the UK is a natural kind of landing spot to grow and scale. But what I would say is that now that we have opened up some of the GCC markets, definitely look at what the proposition is, and particularly in Bahrain, we feel like we've created the right environment to speed up that go-to-market. Whether it's looking for new clients, particularly in banking, as well as government, or on the funding side as well. I think this part of the world is hungry for tech, and we know you have it.
Thank you, Khalid. Thanks for that. And we're going to talk about some of the hottest trend that were here in 2021. I think that Andy, this can go to you. What do you think happened, and how do you see financial institutions adopting different fintechs in a more efficient way? And let's talk about also on the crypto aspect on that manner, and the crypto involvement during the last year. How do you see it from your place in the UK?
Lovely. Well, as much like Khalid as well, and Tom, I'm a member of Level 39 here in the UK. We're the largest fintech accelerator in Europe, and Revolut came out of the same office as us. So we have a slightly different view on the market. Here in the UK, there's a lot of talk about CBDC the last few days. In fact, that's probably topic number one when it comes to the UK right now. That and the continuing legacy of Singapore on the Thames, as they like to call us here in London sometimes. I prefer to be called London on the Thames, but Singapore seems to have that catchy word. So I think what we're seeing here in the UK, and some reports even over the weekend have suggested that Bitcoin has peaked. Partially because of the Coinbase IO, and that's probably given all the central banks a sharp kick up the rear end as well. But as many of us have seen, Coinbase's initial hope and price wasn't perhaps as high as we thought it would be, which I think has made a very, very different impression on the market. Here in the UK, a lot of people were looking at Coinbase, perhaps not as many as America. But when it comes to crypto, one of the things we've noticed is that although Bitcoin's price has doubled since January, Tesla's hasn't. MicroStrategy's gone up maybe 50%, 60%. So what we're seeing is that companies involved in the crypto domain are not necessarily seeing valuations drive as high as Bitcoin itself, which is very interesting, because the disruption that Bitcoin has created over the years is phenomenal. And you'd have thought that some of that disruption would come onto the companies. But what we are seeing is that with Citibank and BNY Mellon and some of the other financial institutions more openly talking about Bitcoin, we saw the report in the FT as well about Citi's embarrassingly bad Bitcoin report. It does show, though, that Citi and BNY Mellon are banks who are very, very involved with fintech startups. And they're also the ones embracing crypto more. So that's what we're seeing here. Perhaps the others are seeing something else, though.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Andy. And maybe, Thomas, from your point of view, what do you see as the hottest trends in the Nordics? What's going on over there?
So I would say definitely, as Andrew said, this is also a hot topic in the Nordics. Actually, one of the companies that's been sitting with us is Chainalysis, coming in from a little bit of different angle, right? But they've been sitting with us when there were 3 people, and now more than 250 out of New York, and looking within compliance and that stuff. So very interesting company, and 2 times unicorn now. I think when we see at the Nordic fintech ecosystem now, we frame it within 4 major trends, and then something that is kind of underpinning that. And I think one of the trends seeing is embedded finance. So you will beginning to see a lot of different enterprises across industries starting to embed financial services towards their customer base, and then adopting different fintech solutions. So that's definitely one trend that we're seeing. The Nordics, obviously being quite wealthy countries, I think we're seeing also an overhaul of wealth management. Mm-hmm. And with different startups tackling different parts of the value chain, but especially with a deep focus on sustainability, but in general, a more holistic approach to financial health and literacy. That also ties into that massive kind of shift that there will be in wealth between generations going forward. So I think that's one area where we really see a lot of action. Mm-hmm. Of course, incumbent reinvention, that's the third trend we kind of see. So financial institutions that are pressured to respond to kind of more mature fintechs. We had Luna, one of the challenger banks here in the Nordics, buying up a big lender in Sweden, mm-hmm. Really increasing their reach in the Nordics. We see incumbent financial institutions play bets on opening up in their different roles as an integrator or an aggregator, supplier, and orchestrator of the in the fintech ecosystem. And then last but certainly not least, we see a fourth trend which is really dominant here in Nordics, and that's the whole small and medium-sized enterprises and digitalization of small and medium-sized enterprises. Mm-hmm. And this is a segment that, with a history of being underserved by financial services, and SMEs is now low-hanging fruit, so to speak, and a key target for fintech solutions. So we really see a lot of stuff happening there, also building on the highly digitized infrastructure in the Nordics. And then the kind of the fifth underpinning trend we see, like some of the most sustainable countries. If you look at the rankings, almost any rankings, that is actually in the Nordic countries. If you look at some of the most digitized, also the Nordic countries, and some of the most innovative. So we see there's a huge demand for sustainable solutions that are sweeping through financial services. So all of the talk is about how can we make green finance and accelerate green finance. And consumers are demanding health, hence also what I talked about, disrupting wealth, are demanding solutions where they can invest in a sustainable way. And the financial industry being so data rich, they can also, in many different ways, help accelerate the green transition and green finance in general. So I think that's what we're seeing, 4 trends and then an underlying sustainability trend.
Yeah, we see the SEG trend is all over the world. The impact fintech solution and segment that is very trending right now in fintech. Khalid, maybe we'll go back to you. By the way, just to mention before that, in Israel, I think that the cybersecurity aspect is very strong, and also blockchain-based cybersecurity solutions, not to mention crypto, but blockchain as an infrastructure, and we see different applications that are coming on top of that infrastructure, identity theft, identity management, authentication, anti-fraud solutions, so on and so forth. But talking about also compliance and RegTech solutions, will be interesting, Khalid, to hear your note about how the Sharia element affects different digital banking solutions in your region, and how does the crypto what's the perception for crypto and cryptocurrencies in your region, in the GCC? Yeah. How do you see it?
So I think, starting with the Sharia element, I think it's important to note that not just in Bahrain, but mostly in the region, we're to both conventional and Islamic banks. So it's not a necessity. However, there's obviously a clear demand, not just in this region, but in the US, in the UK, Far East. And therefore, with this wave of disruption that is definitely focused on the retail side of things, I think Islamic banks, fintechs looking at Islamic products are upping their game. So the likes of, e-Murabaha contracts, for example, that satisfy an asset transfer and so on. There's a lot. I think there's more to grow, specifically from countries with great expertise in Islamic finance, so specifically in Bahrain. I think we're yet to see the advent of that, how it translates into fintech. However, what I would say is that our regulator has been quite forthcoming in pushing forward policies, not just to facilitate innovation, but also to look at encompassing Sharia compliant solutions. So, for example, crowdfunding regulation. We're seeing that not just debt and equity, but also Sharia compliant crowdfunding is now established in Bahrain, and obviously, innovators looking to get into that space will go through that route. robo-advisory as well, picking up on the north. I think this part of the world as well is very hungry for investment, and obviously they have certain demands that come with it, whether it be Sharia compliant or ESG, which in a way there's a lot of overlap actually between Sharia compliant and sustainable finance or green finance. On the crypto side, we've actually we licensed the first MENA crypto exchange in Bahrain. They were actually incubated with us, started with, I think, 4 here in Bahrain, and then now they've grown to, over 100 and are looking at scaling, obviously, to the rest of the GCC and MENA. And then on the back of that, actually, now we've, in the last month or so, the regulator, should I say, is now regulating the first Sharia compliant crypto exchange. So obviously, when it comes to crypto, I think we took a stance very early on, unlike some of the other jurisdictions in the region, to say that we're open for crypto, in the sense that if we can find a use case in terms of investment, not necessarily utilization as a currency, but from an investment standpoint, it can make sense. Hence the rise of what we see now, an influx of crypto players, whether it be on the mining side or the exchange side. I think where the future lies in that is them providing a liquidity pool for other solutions. So I mentioned disruption on the retail side. As I said, we're relatively nascent in this part of the world in terms of pushing out, the likes of Revolut, or even banks pushing out their digital offering to emulate what we're doing. But I think once we start adding the trading element and start trying to incorporate crypto, offering that to the mass retail, I think that's where it can get really interesting from a banking perspective, and then the individual robo-advisors as well, that obviously are linked up to brokers. But I think this provides another additional liquidity pool that's safeguarded by our regulator.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting take on cryptos, and maybe Andy will get back to you with that, because obviously there's a huge movement of crypto in the UK, and will be interesting to hear your take about the governmental treatment in this and how the government sees it.
Yeah, here in the UK, the biggest takeaway has been that the government worked out that anyone hodling Bitcoin is ripe for taxation, and the Chancellor told us all that we're going to be taxed heavily this year. Last year, you could draw out pretty much any amount of Bitcoin and just pay something like 10% or even less. This year, we're looking at 33% taxes on gains on Bitcoin. So the rip-roaring recovery that they've been touting here in the UK will come at the cost of some people who save. But I think in America, it's the same. A lot of people talked about the stimulus checks being used to buy Tesla shares and Bitcoin back in the day. I think here in the UK, we've probably had a similar trajectory when it comes to investments. So the government is very much aware of the fact that there's a lot of crypto in circulation in the country. I mean, we're not quite on the level of Nigeria, and we're not talking about an open ban at the moment. However, the more and more this market grows, the bigger it will be. I'm a member of a group on Facebook, which I've watched grow over the last year, and the maturity of people investing in crypto in the UK is getting better. I'd still think that a lot of them are sitting on Doge coins, and I still don't understand why and who on earth has to work out Dogecoin is valuable or not. But there is an awful lot of Bitcoin speculation and discussion, both in the government and in investment and everywhere else. So we're not quite at the central bank level yet, although the central banks, Bank of England is talking about Kubernetes. They've been doing an awful lot on innovation, but they haven't quite got to that stage now where the head of the Bank of England is actually openly talking about Bitcoin. I think the last senior figure in Europe that talked about Bitcoin was Christine Lagarde back in January, where she called it a bit of funny business. But with that note, Nir.
Thanks for that, Andy. And we can't have an international fintech landscape panel discussion without talking about the SPAC phenomena. And we saw that's happening. Maybe we'll go around the table to hear your opinions about it. Thomas, let's start with you. What's the downside? Do you think it's going to serve fintech companies for the long run? Do you think it's here to stay, or that we are living in a moment that is belong to investors? Well, how do you see that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm always a little bit away. It certainly has have an impact on fintech. I'm a little bit more, maybe a little bit more skeptic. So So there's a lot of money suddenly being flooded into the space, and that always gets me a little bit nervous for the bubble effect. So I would say I'm a little bit skeptic, but also and watching a little bit from the sideline. Certainly, it has an impact. Long term, very hard to say. So right now, I'm observing.
Okay, we'll keep watching together with you. And Khalid, what's your take about that, about SPACs? And is it a phenomenon that is here to stay, or we are witnessing something that is going to be gone with the wind?
Yeah, I echo the last comments. It's very tough to say. I think the advantages are clear, right? That you can almost sidestep the costs and the time and all the kind of steps required to go down the traditional IPO route. But with what's coming out from regulators, and specifically in the US through the SEC, I think the space will be regulated maybe to the extent where it doesn't become interesting anymore, and there are particular hurdles that would put it on par with going down the traditional route. I think for now it's a super interesting space, and seeing how it heats up. I know it's not necessarily a new type of vehicle, but the types of deals being done, like for example with Grab in Singapore, you can see the weight of some of these mergers. So it's interesting to see who goes down that route and who goes down the traditional route, and will that give us any indication as to the long-term sustainability of this?
Yeah, we should probably wait and see how the regulator will treat it. Andy, what's your 2 cents about it? And maybe before we wrap it up, you also add on top of that, how do you see the future trend, the future fintech, or what we're expecting to see in 2022?
Lovely. Well, you did challenge me with that. So I had a look at SPACs, and I've decided that Gary Gensler, the new head of the SEC, doesn't like them. In fact, I think last week there was actually a case in the US. A couple of SPACs have been reported for misinterpreting valuations and what have you. So the pressure is being put on them. And of course, we've seen Elizabeth Warren's new cloud of regulators that she's put into place in America with Joe Biden's help. And these people will be out for SPACs. The other argument is as well that private equity is having serious concerns around the way that SPACs work. And sometimes they're representing customers, their own SPACs rather than SPACs on the market, which is a little bit like the discussion we had about Goldman Sachs and proprietary trading many years ago. So there will be regulation. You can already see where they're going to regulate it. But ultimately, really, Richard Branson, people like that, they're all into SPACs now. The biggest investors in the world, Vista Equity Partners, you name them, they're all involved in it. The question is, how easy will it be to remove them from this? Because they like it. And I think a lot of people also like this model. So I don't think it's going to disappear. I think it's going to evolve.
Okay, thanks for that. And what can we expect for 2022 to bring us? What's your take about it?
I think that once DeFi, decentralized finance, properly hits the mainstream, I think next year you're looking at both quantum computing and DeFi as seriously big topics. Of course, ESG will continue, but I think quantum computing and DeFi next year will be much bigger than we even probably anticipate today. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll remember that for our annual 2022, and we'll get back to you with these predictions. Thomas, what are your predictions? How do you see that evolving, the fintech market evolves?
No, I definitely agree. I think we also see a huge interest in the quantum space. Of course, crypto and that whole space, we're going to see increased attraction there. And then I think coming back to some of my original points around the 4 trends, I think especially a space like the whole digitalization of SMEs. I think we will see that also on the COVID accelerated that trend enormously, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of SMEs now looking into alternative finance, or how can we digitize using different various fintech products. So I think 2022 will also see a surge in that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. Khalid, what are your predictions?
Well, maybe a different angle on this. I think specifically for this part of the world, 2022, we'll start to see, and I hope we will start to see this, that we'll start to see some acquisitions of fintechs buy incumbents. I think the incumbents here have a large capital base. I think a lot of them are looking at new business models and specifically new markets. So we are probably on the cusp of some of that consolidation, if you will. And as we get to a stage where more unicorns are born out of the Middle East, I think that space will definitely heat up, and some of the larger incumbents will definitely be venturing out and look to kind of cement their position globally.
Okay, thanks very much for that, gentlemen. We'll need to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for being with me. Khalid from Bahrain FinTech Bay, Thomas from Copenhagen FinTech, and Andrew from Disruption Banking. Thank you very much. It was very fun. It was much fun with you.
Thank you, Nir.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for our audience. Stay tuned. On the next session, we're going to have a payment discussion with Ziv Cohen from Pageland. Join us there. Thank you very much.